Hello and welcome to this introduction to action learning. There are many different varieties of action learning, and within the action learning community we try not to be too prescriptive in our definitions. Other people have different views of what constitutes action learning. This is my view, but others will recognize similarities of approach, I hope. Action learning is a process that involves a group of individuals coming together to tackle a specific problem or challenge, and using their collective knowledge, skills, and experience to find a solution. The purpose of action learning is not only to solve the problem at hand but also to develop the skills and capabilities of the individuals involved in the process. It must be mentioned that in some instances problems cannot be entirely solved, but their impact can certainly be ameliorated. That is to say, their impact can be lessened. Here we can think about global challenges such as climate change or poverty and inequality. One of the key features of action learning is its emphasis on teamwork and collaboration. The process brings together individuals with diverse backgrounds, skills, and perspectives, who work together to find a solution. This diversity of perspectives often leads to creative and innovative solutions that might not have been possible with a more traditional problem-solving approach. Another important feature of action learning is its focus on individual and group learning. Participants in the process not only develop their problem-solving skills but also enhance their ability to work in teams, communicate effectively, and lead effectively. This learning takes place through a combination of experiential learning, reflection, and feedback. Action learning has been used in a variety of settings, including business, education, healthcare, and government. In business, it is often used to develop leadership skills and to address complex organizational issues. In education, it is used to enhance student learning and to improve teaching practices. In healthcare, it is used to improve patient care and to address complex health system issues. In government, it is used to address policy and service delivery challenges. Action learning was founded by iconoclastic thinker Reg Revans in the 1940s. Revans challenged the inherited wisdom of management development that sought a reliance on expert judgment. Rather, the philosophy of action learning empowers an individual to own their problem. Famously, Revans proposed that organizations cannot flourish unless their rate of learning, L, is equal to, or greater than, the rate of change, C, being experienced. This is written as a formula where L is greater or equal to C. This formula is the basis of the learning organization movement, where in order for organizations to flourish, they must learn faster than changes in the environment. This idea anticipated the interest in learning that dominated management thinking in the 1990s, and whose influence has been absorbed into the kernel of managerial wisdom. Action learning is not a fad or a fashion. It has been around now for many years and will be for many more. Yuri Boschik, who wrote the book Business-Driven Action Learning, identified the following organizations that had used action learning. Many if not all of these are respectable household names. Where action learning differs from traditional modes of instruction is that it is at its most powerful when we don't know what we are doing. Sometimes knowledge has to be rewritten, as inherited wisdom becomes replaced with a new way of thinking. This is exactly the same as businesses having to constantly innovate in the commercial maelstrom that is creative destruction. This is where traditional instruction reaches its limitations. Usually this is constrained to how previous challenges were resolved. It is rooted in the dangerous habits of legacy thinking, tradition and conservatism in the face of new developments. What makes action learning unique is its questioning insight. Rather than offer advice, peers ask questions that help provide insight that may help the participant reframe the issue. Traditional modes of instruction, which are still relevant, is known as programmed information, or P. Questioning insight is known as Q. Thus, Revans proposed that learning, or L, is a function of programmed knowledge and questioning insight. Coincidentally, you will often see the learning formula written as L equals P plus Q, but being a physicist, he wrote it as a function, which people after him have simplified. Thus, learning is a function of programmed knowledge and questioning insight. As one participant on an action learning program observed, "Your advice at the beginning was useless, your anecdotes were boring, but your questions really helped me." Revans's early career was spent at the Cavendish Laboratory under Lord Rutherford and Sir J. J. Thomson. There were 5 Nobel Prize winners in his department. Whilst being such eminent scientists, they also shared the same quality of intellectual humility. Revans started to develop the idea that when we are working at the frontier of our knowledge and experience, the skill is to embrace our vulnerability. Problems are as unique as fingerprints. So each of us can face situations by peers asking non-judgmental questions of us. Insightful questions cause us to pause and reflect. The domain of P, or programmed knowledge, is on the left of this diagram. The domain of Q, or questioning insight, is the shaded area on the right of the diagram, where we are working at the frontier of our knowledge and experience. Here, insightful questions help us to unravel our next step. Revans also made a distinction between puzzles and problems. Puzzles have best solutions and are usually solved by experts. Problems, however, have no right answers, and are tackled by people in different ways by the exercise of critical insight. Action learners meet in sets. These are usually a fairly fixed group of people that meet on a regular basis. This may be weekly, fortnightly, or monthly, depending on the circumstances. In a work environment, action learning sets are a group of individuals brought together to work on problems, issues, challenges, and opportunities of managing and organizing. However, there are a couple of conditions that make the functioning of an action learning set more effective. Firstly, there must be a voluntary commitment on the part of the individual. Secondly, the participants need to work on problems which individually and personally engage members. What we say is, I am part of the problem, and the problem is part of me. Action learning sets thus exist to check individual perceptions of the problem and explore alternatives to action. They exist to take action in light of new insights which begin to change the situation. They also account for the consequences of the action which are brought back to the set to repeat the cycle. I would say this constant revisiting of the complex issue is an essential feature of action learning. Thus, in space learning, time is needed to act, and to see the results of one's actions. To talk with others. To gain perspective. To review theory that might inform one's next actions. To act again. To let go of old ideas. To try anew. In this spaced learning, the rhythm of development matches the rhythm of the workplace. Where challenges occur, problems are exacerbated or get better. They decline in importance, then resurface. Are confounded with other issues. And sometimes resolved by no actions of our own. Development occurs through challenges of real work, thus, the schedule of a management development program must correspond to the schedule of the real world. It follows that such a development program may need to be spaced over time with spaced learning meetings. These spaced learning meetings are part of the learning, and not simply a way of determining if learning has occurred or to report on its results. However, the set is not only there to address the problem, issue, challenge, or opportunity. Action learning sets are also there to provide the balance of support and challenge, warmth and light. The set enables each member to act and learn effectively. One of the byproducts of action learning is that it also enables participants to become aware of group processes and develop effective teamwork skills. I think the following quote from Reg Revans neatly encapsulates the process most eloquently. The essence of action learning is to extract from the new task itself a sustainable desire to know what one is trying to do, what is stopping one from doing it, and what resources can be found to get it done, by surmounting what seems to stand in the way. These 6 questions help formulate our thinking when addressing our problem, issue, challenge, or opportunity. What am I trying to do? What is stopping me from doing it? What can I do about it? Who knows what I am trying to do? Who cares about what I am trying to do? Who can do anything to help? These 2 further quotes from Revans illustrate his philosophy. Action learning pretends to be nothing more. Learning by action, or doing better tomorrow by asking how well the job is being done today. The development of the manager is to be seen as a natural outcome of their successful daily practice. By tackling today's problems more thoughtfully, he or she automatically learns how better to tackle tomorrow's. Thus, rather than learning in a classroom, the philosophy of action learning is rooted in work-based learning. In action learning, we make the distinction between the learned manager, one who is steeped in program knowledge, and the learning manager, one who is constantly open to new ideas and experiences and is willing to challenge the inherited wisdom. Indeed, many years ago, Chris Argyris predicted that there would be a move away from management development programs that teach managers how to think and behave, to programs that help managers to learn from experience. Thus, as Peter Honey wrote, we require less emphasis on developing learn-ed managers, and more on developing, learning managers. Thus, a learned manager is someone who knows all the theory, but is perhaps not so good at putting it into practice. On the other hand, a learning manager is someone who is constantly adapting to their environment and is open to change. This is why action learning is such a great phrase. Ultimately, it is about putting learning into action. While action learning is there to address an organizational issue, we also find there is a spin-off of self-development for the individual. This is why it must be a voluntary involvement for it to be ethical. As Peter Honey wrote, the door to development is locked from the inside. This emphasizes the processes of how to learn, how to diagnose managerial situations, and how to learn from experience. As Peter Honey wrote, these are timeless wisdoms. Though Revans developed his own version, David Kolb's experiential learning cycle is now the most commonly accepted model for integrating experience into our theories in use. It can be entered at the top or bottom of the cycle, as to whether we have an exogenous experience, or an endogenous idea, in the abstract. It is usually explained from the exogenous perspective, that is, having a concrete experience. This leads us to observe and have reflections. This leads to the formation of abstract concepts and generalizations. This then leads to testing implications of concepts in new situations, which then starts the cycle again by having a concrete experience. The best example of experiential learning that most people can relate to is learning to ride a bike. Here the concrete experience has a double meaning. It is through experimentation and skill development that we acquire our new capability. Kolb's learning cycle is often referred to as single-loop learning. Recursive self-improvement until we acquire a measure of competence. This diagram also shows double-loop learning, a term coined by Chris Argyris. Thus, single-loop learning iterates between action and consequences. But what happens if there is a mismatch between the two? This causes us to re-evaluate what psychologists refer to as our governing variables. This means the consequences of our engagement. We may decide that we should not be undertaking the activity at all, or we may wish to change the way in which we engage in that activity. While single-loop learning is about an uncritical commitment to improvement, double-loop learning involves a decision. If we refer back to our cycling example, this may question our commitment to learning to ride a bike, or whether we should put the stabilizers back on. Although it has not been shown here, there is also triple-loop learning, which is about learning to learn. This is a meta-level analysis of how we as individuals perform as learners. The virtuous loop also exists for the relationship between theory and practice, which is another example of the relationship between cause and effect. This particular virtuous loop was encapsulated by Peter Checkland. He proposed that good theory leads to good practice and intervention, which in turn generates improved theory. At the top of this diagram we see the cycle that good theory leads to good practice, and good practice generates new theory. Below it we see the interrelationship between the three components of action learning: knowledge and understanding, skills and competences, personal development, growth and change. Indeed, personal development, growth and change is an important part of action learning. Richard Paul wrote that, research by cognitive psychologists and others have clearly established the fact that when humans deeply learn something, in contrast to, say, storing it temporarily in short-term memory, that learning involves the construction of meaning. This is why the phrase used earlier, "I am part of the problem, and the problem is part of me," is an important prerequisite. As Machiavelli wrote over 500 years ago, it should be borne in mind that there is nothing more difficult to handle, more doubtful of success, and more dangerous to carry through, than initiating change. Although not originally conceived by Revans, action learning sets usually have a facilitator. A facilitator can be described as someone who holds the context of the discussion. Action learning facilitators have a number of different roles. Firstly, they help set members acquire the skill of action learning. Secondly, they focus learning at 3 levels: about the problem at hand, about the individual set member, and finally, as we have already observed, about the process of learning. In other words, learning to learn. This presentation has, thus far, extolled the virtues of action learning. But what is the downside of it all? First of all, there may be what I have termed action learning apprehension. The fear of the unknown, as you don't know the end game. Secondly, it may all seem a bit daunting at first. There may also be the fear among set members as to whether they are doing action learning correctly. Are they following the right processes? If they were doing it wrong, how would they know? Action learning also removes the reassurance of having an expert guide them. And indeed, some people do not like the lack of specific guidance. Also, it has to be said, some people find action learning a bit touchy-feely. Hence, with the risk and uncertainty, sometimes defensive routines can kick in that affect the running of the set. So, what are the outcomes of an action learning program? As Christina Weinstein wrote, it turns out people who are able to think clearly, who challenge, who have gained in self-confidence, who question, seek responsibility and a sense of achievement, who listen to and value perspectives, and who know the benefits of collaboration rather than confrontation. The final word goes to John Morris, who wrote, "Action learning offers many advantages to the busy practitioner, notably its immediate relevance to the challenges and demands of real life. It is also immensely flexible and attractive to adult learners because it respects their independence and experience." In conclusion, action learning is a powerful problem-solving and leadership development approach that brings together individuals with diverse perspectives and skills to tackle complex challenges. It emphasizes teamwork, collaboration, and individual and group learning, and has been used successfully in a variety of settings. Action learning is a valuable tool for organizations and individuals who want to develop their problem-solving skills and enhance their ability to work effectively in teams.